Hello and welcome to an installment of the Wyfutbol podcast with me, Echizadoku, and Michael Dryden. In recent times, we've lost the great Gerd Müller, so we'll be taking a look back at his career, his playing style, his time at Bayern, his record for West Germany, and we'll discuss whether goal poachers get enough credit. Before we start, please follow us on Twitter at Wyfutbol_ and subscribe with us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Acast, and YouTube. Hello, Dryden, how you doing?
Hello, Ches. Yeah, I'm not bad. Just to begin with, FYI for all or any of the Gerd Müller experts that are listening to this podcast, I'm not going to be saying, or we're not going to be saying that he was just a goal poacher. But I put that in the intro because I thought it was an interesting discussion at the end to discuss. You get people going, oh yeah, well, Miroslav Klose was a good player, a good record, but he just scored tap-ins, etc., and all that. And it's like, well, is that all that he had in his game? Is it that easy? But we'll get to that. That's just FYI before I get sent for in my DMs before someone's even stopped listening. But yeah, on the whole, not bad. Just watch the Arsenal game. I believe you'll have a lot to say about that, Etches. But to be fair, on the whole, I did think Arsenal got a lot better and grew into the game. I know Chelsea were already 2-0 up at that point, but I didn't think it was too bad. It's just a couple of individual mistakes, like Mari on Lukaku a couple of times getting too close, and then Tierney for the second one. I don't know why he's trying to press Mount, leave that space, then realizes, runs back, and then by that time, James is basically in and gets the goal. So what were your thoughts on it?
So shall I say thank you everyone for listening to Wyfutbol this week. It's me, Etches, and Dryden. We'll catch you next time. Thank you. How was the game? Yeah, we went very good. I think, in short, what it highlighted were Arsenal were missing quite a lot of key players. The goals, especially the first one, were from key people in positions. We need better right backs. Cedric is playing on, I think it's Reece James by about 2 yards. Had he been on side or had he been in line with the defence, I think James would have been offside by half a leg. So that was unfortunate, but he's not good enough. Mari gets a lot of stick, but he is third choice CB, as Holding is fourth choice CB, with obviously Gabriel and Ben White, the preferred partnership. Gabriel is still recovering from injury and is back soon. So I do sympathise when you're playing against the likes of Lukaku.
Yeah.
However, it's still a bit blunt going forwards. I think Arsenal played the first 2/3 of the pitch well at times, their defensive third and the middle third, but that final third, man, like it's just too toothless. They're not getting enough shots on target. It's too speculative. There is good possession. They're getting into good positions, but it's just not really working out. There were some positives. I thought Pepe played all right, Saka as well, but it's still a bit toothless, and it doesn't get any easier with City up next. Also, as well, to all of our listeners, make sure it's Wyfutbol_, because since we started the podcast, in my Twitter bio, I've had just at Wyfutbol, and that is just some random guy who hasn't tweeted anything. So I've been sending traffic to his page. So I hope he's thankful for that. So the original Wyfutbol, if you're listening, don't worry about
it. Thanks for that. So let's move into today's episode, which is on the late Gerd Müller. So we always start our episodes off with why this episode. Pretty obvious for this one. Gerd Müller, many will be aware, passed away last Sunday at the age of 75. Unfortunately, he battled severe Alzheimer's, dementia, for a number of years after his career. He spent the last 5 years in a care home, basically becoming bedbound and eventually passing, which is really sad. His wife, Ushi, said he'd been a fighter his whole life, but he didn't just fight. He actually excelled. And look, I didn't know a lot about Gerd Müller before doing this. For looking at this episode, I have to admit, I knew Gerd Müller was, because he's just he's a legend of the game, a legend of World Cups and European Championships and the Bundesliga. But I didn't realize how prolific he was. According to Wiki, in all competitions for all clubs, not just Bayern, he scored 654 goals in 716 appearances, which is mad.
That is
which
mad.
is pretty mad. So it's just bonkers. He's got the record of 365 Bundesliga goals for Bayern in 427 matches. So he's the all-time Bundesliga goal scorer, as you will not be surprised to see. So yeah, why are we doing this episode? While most people of our generation, like myself, like you, Ches, have certainly heard of Gerd Müller, I'm not sure many would know much more about him. He played in the 60s and the 70s. He retired, I think it was 81. I do have that stat later on, but it's in my notes later. But Yeah, so yeah, well before our time. But today's the day that our generation will find out a bit more about the late great Gerd Müller. So we'll start off by looking at who was Gerd Müller. So Gerd Müller was born 3rd November 1945 in Nordlingen in Bavaria, Germany, which is like between Stuttgart and Munich. For some context there, he's one of 5 children, and after leaving school at 14, pretty young, he became an apprentice weaver. But in 1962, age 17, began playing, or eventually started playing, for the first team of his hometown amateur club, TSV Nordlingen, scoring 51 goals for them in the 63-64 season. This gained him some notoriety, and nearby Bayern Munich heard of his exploits, signed him up in 1964. This is actually when Bayern Munich were in the second tier of German football and hadn't really reached, well, they hadn't at all reached the heights of what we know about them today and what they eventually became in the 70s and the 80s. And 33 goals in his first season at Bayern helped them restore their top flight Bundesliga status. And within 4 years, Bayern were German champions once again, a title they won 4 times in 5 years during Muller's stay at the club. And prior to that, Bayern had only won 1 league title, which is in 1932, which is, it's a long time ago. But to think that it took them until the 60s to then win another title, a lot of people will be surprised by that, given how dominant Bayern are in Germany.
Yeah, exactly. You've taken the words out of my mouth. It's just mad how dominant they are now, to consider that they were such a relative minnow compared to the other teams that were around back then. The actual champions in '64 were FC Köln, who you know very well, but these
Nice.
days are miles apart from Bayern. And the way Bayern are now, if we do a podcast in 10 years, if this podcast still exists, we'll probably be talking about, will Bayern win their 40th league in a row? Because that's the way it's shaping up at the moment.
Yeah, God, yeah, 65-year-old Lecce is still banging about Arsenal and talking about how Bayern is still German champions. Can't wait for it. But yeah, the FC Köln. When the Bundesliga came back after COVID,
Yeah.
and loads of clubs in England were like choosing a partner team for all their fans to go out and watch. Sunderland partnered with FC Köln, and they're like, "Yeah, go and watch FC Köln's games." No. I also went to an FC Cole game in Cologne. I banged on about before. It was good fun, so I do recommend going. But yeah, I'm not just going to go because you tell me to. I want to go and watch it. He acquired the nickname, or Muller acquired the nickname Bomber de Nation, or Nation, meaning the nation's bomber. He had a very catchy song named after him. Would you like to hear this song?
Even if I say
called,
no, you're going to play it.
Yes, I am. I'm going to play you the actual video of my phone, but I'm going to dub this in afterwards, so
Nice.
listeners can get a better hearing. But
can't wait.
It's called "Then Go Boom."
This is his song.
This is it's called "Dan Match S Boom." Then go boom. The chorus goes, "Then there's a boom, then there's a roar, and everyone shouts, 'Yes, Muller's scored!'"
Oh, mad. That's time I'll never get back in my life. Thank you.
Well, the first article I read on Muller, it had that at the top. I was like, well, surely this is a big song in Germany. It had that particular video had 750,000 plays, so I assume it's well known. If not, then I'm sorry for wasting everyone's time. So to move onto more about Gerd Müller. So his playing style, going back to I mentioned about goal poaching at the start of the episode. So there's an interesting quote here from Peter Mason, who is part of The Guardian, who written an obituary about Muller very recently since his death. So I thought I'd read that out. So his interpretation of Muller was, he was short and had a thick set, but supremely well balanced. Muller had a devastating burst of pace over short distances and was exceedingly agile inside the 6-yard box, where he scored a large proportion of his goals through opportunism and quick thinking. Despite being only 5'9", he was also an excellent header of the ball. Is 5'9" that short? I'm 5'11". I didn't think I was ever that short, but there we go. We'll take that. But yeah, so what I said earlier about, he's more than just a goal poacher. he is. If you watch his clips on YouTube, I know it's quite subjective because if you watch anyone's if you watch like Raul's top 5 goals,
Mm,
he looks like he looks like Cristiano Ronaldo level
mm,
type of goals he scores.
mm,
But we all know that Raul was very much a bit like, as described to extent with Muller and players like Klose, a bit of a poacher. Um, but on the whole, when you look at his goals, even his best goals, a lot of goals inside the box. He seems to be a very, very good, or was a very good header of the ball. A couple of those goals I saw outside the box, very, very powerful low strikes. I think it was just a superb and lethal finisher is what I got from looking at videos, even from that analysis from Peter. It He just looked like he's absolutely ruthless. And you do well. I mean, you don't score over 600 career goals by being pretty average at finishing,
very true.
like a young Josie Altidore. Aside from that, he looked exactly like your classic 70s footballer. Long sleeves, long hair, and he often sported this pretty questionable and very heavy Mark Lawrenson-esque mustache, which I could see you sporting, to be fair, Ches.
I don't know. I don't know about that one. I mean, the only real takeaway from that, aside from the really interesting facts about Gerd Müller, is I guess 5'9" to be really good in the air is quite rare. I mean, it's not specifically short. Obviously, the famous Cannavaro was a brilliant header of the ball and was under 6 foot, but
Yeah.
it is quite rare, I would say. And the other takeaway is that I think personally in my own life, the quality of life that I've lived so far
Oh,
significantly increased when Mark Lawrenson retired from Match of the Day.
oh, really?
Yeah, because his analysis absolutely bombed it. Him and who was the other guy? There's one.
Alan Hansen. I,
Yeah.
I didn't mind Hansen that much. I
Uh,
thought he actually tried. The thing with Lawrenson is, right, apart from his fairly questionable analysis of football matches, he just thought he's one of them guys who's really like very, very dry and thought he was really funny. You meet someone who like is just so dry,
yeah.
but does it because they think it's funny. He just wasn't that funny. You get people who are actually quite dry and quite funny, comics like Jack D, for example, but he just wasn't funny.
Mate, if Mark Lawrenson was an item in your kitchen, it'd be garlic because his chat absolutely reeked. Absolutely reeked, mate. Absolutely reeked. That's all I have to say about him.
All right, good. So moving on. So his success, Gerd Muller's success at Bayern Munich, we'll look at next. So as I mentioned, he joined Bayern in 1964 from TSV Nordlingen. He joined along with 2 other Bayern greats, Franz Beckenbauer and Sepp Maier. And this really started a golden era for the club. And we touched on before, is arguably set the foundations for their success in modern times. Because before the arrival of those players, they weren't a force in the country. In the 60s and 70s, Muller won the Bundesliga 4 times, including 3 in a row between 1971 and 1974. He won 4 DFB Pokals, their version of the FA Cup, and 3 European Cups, including, 3 in a row between 1973 and 1976. I don't know why I put 3 European Cups and 3 in a row between. But yeah, so it has to be obviously 3. Um, yeah, 3 in a row, which is pretty mad. I
That's
know
pretty much.
Real um, have had that feed before, but it is bonkers. And also a European Cup Winners' Cup to Gerd Muller's name. He scored against Atletico Madrid in the 74 European Cup final replay and in the 75 final against Leeds United in Paris. He had held the record for the most Bundesliga goals in a single season with 40, which is mad, until it was beaten by Robert Lewandowski, I think it was last season, who got 41, which is bonkers, really.
Mm.
He remains the Bundesliga all-time goal scorer with 365 goals. That is a lot of goals. Lewandowski has got, it's just shy of about 100 behind Muller. And if you think Alan Shearer's Premier record is 260 goals, which has stood fairly unattested for a while, really. I mean, people talk about Kane could potentially break that because he came, but his goal record and he's still got a lot of years left. We think of 260 has been a lot for Alan Shearer to have had, but 365.
Yeah, yeah.
Bonkers.
Personally, I don't think 260 is that much. I think it is a lot, but I think in Shearer's case, the best ballers that are strikers have always left England. Shearer obviously spent his whole career here. I look at Henri. I look at if Aguero came here from 1920. I look at potentially Kane as well. Obviously, Ronaldo, what he went on to do.
Yeah.
Suarez potentially as well. Maybe not Suarez. He also came a bit later in his career, but I think there are potentials. It's quite unique for England actually to have a Brit who's managed to bag that many goals in that period of time. I think that's probably the most difficult one. But fun fact for you: the only non-Bayern memorabilia in the museum is actually from Lionel Messi, who
In
broke
which museum?
in Bayern
In
Munich's museum
oh right, okay.
because Lionel Messi broke Gerd Müller's record for 85 goals in a calendar year. And when
Mm.
he did that, he signed a shirt for Gerd, and it's in the Bayern Museum.
Oh, nice. I actually didn't have that fact in here, so I'm really glad you said it.
Yeah,
It's
it's not
pretty
bad,
good.
mate. It's not bad. I read that on Twitter, so that could actually be wrong. So let's hope it's not.
To be fair, like when I was putting this together, I just lost in facts and accolades about him.
Hmm.
Like you really have to be selective, because I could have went on literally forever.
Yeah, I can imagine. Obviously, when you're so revered in the game, you must have quite a few facts and statements floating about.
Indeed. Yeah, so moving on to the national team. So Muller scored 68 goals in 62 games for West Germany.
Yeah.
He was Germany's all-time leading goal scorer for about 40 years until it's surpassed by Miroslav Klose in 2014. Although Klose required over double the number of caps to do so, scoring his 69th goal in his 132nd appearance. Bit of a side point here. I've just randomly thought of this. There's a couple of I don't know their names. There's a couple of players who have just retired at US women's national team level. They've got like over 300 appearances. I couldn't believe it. I was like, what? It's pretty pointless fact because I haven't got the names and the numbers, but just FYI, go and check that out.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Uh, no worries. Muller was top scorer at the 1972 European Championships and picked up a winner's medal with West Germany in that competition. He scored 10 times at the 1970 World Cup, and then a further 4 at the 1974 World Cup, which West Germany actually won. Muller scored the winning goal in a 2-1 victory over Johan Cruyff's Netherlands in the final. After that tournament, he held the record for the most World Cup goals until 2006, when it was broken by. I read it was broken by R9 Ronaldo, which surprised me because I know that he scored a lot in 2002 and 2006, maybe, but was he at 98? I don't know. Someone will have to fact check that. Someone slide into our DMs, please, and check that. I'll get us on Twitter. But yeah, that's just a bit mad. He only played in 2 tournaments, Muller, and he was the leading goal scorer in World Cups for a long time.
He's just so prolific. We're in a way with it now with Ronaldo and Messi, but there are people like Muller. I know that Jimmy Greaves is similar as well, where these guys are literally getting a goal a game in a different era. It's just
Yeah,
obviously football moves on so quickly and you remember the names, but then when you actually see their numbers and stats, back when stats probably weren't even collated the way they are now, some of these footballers were extremely impressive.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've just looked at the list of World Cup highest goal scorers now. So Miroslav Klose is number 1 now, as we all know. Ronaldo is number 2 because he did break Gerd Muller's record in 2006. Ronaldo played in 98, 2000, 2002, and 2006. Gerd Muller is 3rd. Do you know who number 4 is? Chiz? It's
Mm,
very hard. He was in 1950. He had this record off the back of one tournament, 1958.
well, Pele.
No, it was Just Fontaine, who I've actually never heard of.
Oh, just want to say for France.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have, if you didn't tell me no, I wouldn't have got it. I would have said maybe Papin or someone, but fair, okay.
He scored 13 goals in the 1958 World Cup in 6 games.
What? Fair.
Pele scored Pele scored 12 in 4 World Cups, 14 matches. Miroslav Klose played 24 matches. That is
Yeah, he
loads.
played a lot.
So moving on now to post Bayern and Germany. This is definitely some facts that I did not know. Muller quit playing for West Germany after the 1974 World Cup triumph, following an argument with the German Football Association at the post-tournament celebration, when officials' wives were allowed to attend, but players' wives were not. I just find
Mm.
that. Why were their wives not allowed?
Uh, I, I can't even give a reasonable answer. I don't know.
Numbers? You know, when you like,
Numbers,
yeah, like,
no plus ones.
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe they didn't have enough money, mate. Like I don't know. That's so bizarre.
Yeah, and 5 years later, Muller left Bayern for Florida to join Fort Lauderdale, allegedly after objecting to being substituted in a match against Eintracht Frankfurt. I've got no other information about this, but he just sounds like he was taking no nonsense from absolutely anyone.
Yeah, when you said that, the first person that came to mind was, when Balotelli tried that back-heeled goal in pre-season
Yeah.
and got
Yeah.
subbed off straight. The funniest thing is obviously he's clean through one-on-one. He tries the back heel, it misses, it like goes way wide. He just gets subbed off straight away, and
It was just
he's not even fussed.
it was nowhere near as well. Like it was just, and I don't know how he actually expected to score with that particular move in that particular position. He was like to the right of the goal, and Dzeko was just like, "What are you doing?"
He did whatever he wanted. That guy, fair play to him.
Yeah, he did. So Muller later retired from football in 1981, age 36. He opened a steakhouse in Fort Lauderdale with his wife Ushi, but succumbed to alcoholism. He allegedly received support from Bayern, who were involved in getting him professional help, which apparently basically saved his. Well, I mean, arguably could have saved his life. Um, then Bayern hired him as a youth coach after he became dry, where he remained for 2 decades until he retired in 2013. I assume it was like Bayern saying, "Look, yeah, we'll get you professional help. If you can get over it, then we'll bring you back, and we'll bring you back as a coach." Perhaps he slipped into alcoholism because, some players post. I mean, this could be a classic example. Some players post sport. Like I think of Flintoff with cricket. There's probably loads of examples with football, even Paul Merson, something like that, where if they stop playing football, they stop being the limelight, and they just struggle with it.
Mm.
And I don't know as a fact that happened with him, but for him to have been like one of the biggest stars in the world, and then suddenly he's like just a bit small time. Because I mean, that time, I mean, what that was, it would have been the 90s when he. Oh no! Well, sorry, it was the 80s when he retired. So he would have been 80s and 90s when he'd been having like, owning the steakhouse, whatever. He wouldn't probably is not like nowadays footballers are multimillionaires when they retire.
Yeah.
But was Gerd Müller probably not.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that one. And also as well, you said you overwhelmed with the amount of facts and figures to throw in for Gerd Müller. I rate how you had to throw it in that he opened up a steakhouse. Just in case you're wondering, you're in a steakhouse. But no, I think you're right. Like a lot of footballers of that era in particular, and now in modern era, but I think with social media and TV and in coaching as well, they seem to be a bit more involved. But there definitely is that era of ballers that really struggled with alcoholism when they left the game, which is sad. It was good to see that he managed to come through that.
Yeah, so I mean, potentially as well, it could have been a factor in later being diagnosed with Alzheimer's, which was in I think it was 2015. He was diagnosed, and there was I read that even when he was still coaching, he was like very forgetful and stuff. So there was symptoms coming on whilst he was still coaching in the youth setup at Bayern. So that'd be very sad for people to see that. And I mean, he died. What was it, 75? Like, in this day and age, that's no age really to pass away. And I wonder if that alcoholism did affect that. But I mean, one thing I didn't find at all actually, and I actually explicitly tried to Google this, although I don't speak German, so I was Googling this in English and couldn't find it.
Mm.
Was like any, when in England when we've had players get diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia or both, or have then died from it, i.e. Jack Charlton, there's been a lot in the press about the links between Alzheimer's, dementia, CTE, and football, heading the football, all this sort of stuff. I couldn't find anything like that with Muller. It was a good 5 years, obviously, or 6 years ago that he was diagnosed. So I don't know if there was talk of it then. It was a little bit before these sort of discussions came about, but I was interested. I couldn't find, if I was German and speak German, I could possibly have found it because it would have likely have been in German press, that sort of talk. But yeah, I didn't find anything like that, which I thought was interesting. And I just wonder if it is as big an issue, like, or is in the press in other nations as well as England, because it has been recently, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's one of those where it just needs the right limelight for the right amount of people to get the relative focus and research to find, the link between it for modern day footballers so it can be a lot better. I think
Mm.
England's is very unique because of '66. I think obviously they're a heralded era, some of them are knighted, etc. So a lot of
Yeah.
focus is on them because of who they are. Germany have obviously been successful way more than England across multiple years, across multiple decades. However, because England has that iconic '66 team that have also come to similar illnesses, perhaps it has a bit more traction.
Yeah. Agreed.
Obviously, we have Dennis Law very recently at Man United, who also has Alzheimer's as well. But it's all adding into the fuel and the fire of these players from the '66 team. So Bobby Charlton, Jack Charlton, etc. So that is an interesting point. As you check out our podcast on
Yeah.
aging and Alzheimer's, actually, it was a really good episode.
Yeah, it was. I mean, as I said, I might have just missed something. So, don't take that as a fact. There might have been loads to talk about at the time, but I couldn't find anything. I thought it'd be interesting if there were, because it was a number of years ago as well. Yeah, and Chris Sutton, I saw on Twitter actually saying how he's just had enough of the excuses that are potentially being made to like prevent this kind of deeper dive into the relationship between dementia and football. So moving on, so I did a little section here in my notes about why is he so revered. Probably is a waste of time because we've just mentioned his goals, which are pretty mad. I mean, what 365 goals for Bayern in the Bundesliga in 400 um, odd appearance for 400 odd Bundesliga appearances. Countless goals for Germany in the 60s, over a goal a game. He won the 1970 Ballon d'Or 2 years before winning the European Championships. Two-time German Footballer of the Year. He won the Bundesliga top scorer award 7 times. And he won the European Golden Shoe winner twice, which is a big feat, to be fair. So, I mean, what can we say? I mean, his numbers just don't lie, man. Like, I implore anyone to try and find some videos on YouTube. You'll see exactly the sort of player he is. You're not going to get free kicks scored from 35 yards, but you're going to see how ruthless that guy is as a finisher. And um, at a time as well when the pitches weren't as good and the ball was a bit harder and all that sort of thing. So playing those one, you see them kind of first time finishes,
Mm.
and they actually are a lot more impressive. Not to say they're not now, and that brings us on to our discussion, as I mentioned right at the start, of do goal poachers get enough credit? So yeah, I'm not saying Muller is just a goal poacher. We've clearly talked about how he's much more than that as a person and as a player. But as we have discussed, he did score a lot of goals in the box, a lot of first-time finishes, very good positionally wise, very good at sticking the ball in the back of the net. So the discussion I'm going with is, do goal poachers get enough credit? I've had this conversation recently with friends in the pub, etc. About not about Gerd Müller, but around like just generally, like if a player scores what's perceived as a tap in, so like, oh yeah, Harry Kane scored twice the weekend, but it was 2 tap ins. That's a um, that would be an example of the sort of conversation we'd be having. And well, you know, scoring those goals isn't a given. You need to be in that position at the right time. It takes effort to get in those positions. To make those runs, it takes effort. It doesn't just happen. You've got to make those sprints. You've got to make a lot of failed sprints because most of the runs you make don't end up in goals. And so you've got to have that anticipation, that drive and commitment, and you've got to have that decision-making ability to know exactly where you need to be, either because you've worked a lot with your team or generally your instinct in the game is really good, because you've got that eye for goal. And I just think I don't think poachers perhaps do get enough credit because we discussed like players like Raul and players like Miroslav Klose, even someone like Gerd Müller, right? Looking at those numbers, look at what he's won. And I know who Gerd Müller is because he's renowned as a legend in the game, okay? So he is revered. He is referred to as a legend. Is he referred to as one of the greatest players of all time? I'm not certain if he would be up there with some of the players that are revered, even though his numbers are just crazy.
People remember players by specific moments, right? So you've got like the Gareth Bale run, around Mark Bartra, and there could be
Yeah,
countless goals you could mention for Lionel Messi, as well as Cristiano Ronaldo. I think with poachers, what they tend to lack is that iconic moment. So they may score in big finals and big games. I'm not saying they don't, but when time goes on and you think about a specific final, a specific time, you forget those goals because they're not memorable. And I
yeah,
think that's where poachers can get lost in it. We've had stoppers and destroyers in our time, and all these roles have changed, and poachers have changed massively as well. And I guess in the modern era that they're kind of being phased out. But it's just, I think one of the main reasons as to why they're not revered as much as they should be is just simply because they're not as memorable. And even someone like Miroslav Klose, who was an elite finisher, I think it's just that the greatest in the game people perceive as doing more. Maybe they're more rounded. You know, like I didn't watch Miroslav Klose most of his career. I know that he scored a lot of goals. From the times that I've seen him, I can't really name any memorable goals compared to, let's think of a striker of that era. Ties in with Henry. Maybe he's a little bit ahead of Henry's time, but they were still playing at similar periods of time. Even people like Totti. Yeah, there are loads of different players I can mention, strikers, cams, whatever. We think, oh, wow, that was a moment where they did this. But when it's a poacher, you often see them as they're lacking abilities to make them more well-rounded, which makes them a better player overall. I think that's unfair. I think it's mostly because they're just not as memorable. That's what they much credit.
I do agree. I think the Van Basten goal, for example, like that's all I know about Van Basten, really, is that goal. I know he played for AC, I know he played for the Netherlands, but because that goal is so iconic, I know of that player. And it's true for a lot of players. Whereas your Miroslav Klose, you wouldn't have one single goal that would like mark it out and would be in a reel that would go through the ages. But yeah, it's I think as well, like with poachers, there's this kind of like people seem to think that, well, if they weren't in a good team, they couldn't put the numbers they do, because if their game is naturally to find the right areas and to poach goals and to be in the box, they do have to rely quite a bit on their teammates in theory, because they can make all the right runs. If the ball isn't put there, then they're not going to score. Whereas some people would say, like you said, players like Henry could arguably get the ball, and did on so many occasions, fashion chances out for himself and score goals on his own. You know, that goal against Spurs, you know, that was him. I mean, that's one example of one of them goals where like the defending was so bad that I have to say it has to be taken down a notch by 10%. But it was still outrageous, and like he scored that goal on his own. You know, Miroslav Klose, even so like Gerd Müller, seemingly probably wouldn't be able to match that feat. You know, Henry's goal against United, we flicks it over Bartez's head. Like that's just another example. So yeah, I mean, there's more to the game than finishing, I suppose. So that would lend itself to it. But I would say as a conclusion, you know, I don't think we should overlook players like Muller, players like, you know, Raul. They are still revered, but I perhaps think they don't get the credit they might deserve.
I mean, that's the perfect time to kind of end the pod for this week. So thank you to everyone who put in their prayers last week for the Arsenal result. It did absolutely nothing. So I would ask you to do it again this week, but we've got City coming up next. So just save it for when we have that relegation rival battle against Norwich. That could be a key one to help us stay in the league. But yeah, don't forget to comment and subscribe with us. And we'll see you next time. Thank you very much for the information, Dryden, as well.
No worries.
Let's add that one in. And
no worries.
Yeah, have a good evening, everyone.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.